This is a classic woodland pond. This pond is not fed by nor drained by any creek. So the water that's here comes from the rain. Sometimes it might be fed by a creek that overflows its banks, but it's not regularly fed by a creek. This means that this pond will evaporate probably by the end of August. And because it doesn't have a fish population, the tadpoles of the frogs and the larvae of the salamanders are able to live here. So the salamanders and the frogs lay their eggs here and the fish won't eat them. So it's a safe place for them to be. Often by such a pond like this, you might find another marshy area. Let's go see if we can find one here. The marshy area has a couple inches of water in it, but not enough water, not enough depth to support many animals. Like you won't really find turtles in here. It's not deep enough for them to swim down and hide, but it is deep enough for wood frogs. So this is a marsh area. This supports different types of animals. You might find some small frogs in here. You'll find some tadpoles. You will probably not find any salamanders because it's not deep enough for them. But you'll have all kinds of different animals that live in here. So this is a type of a vernal pond too. It's not very deep, but it'll have the first frogs, the peepers and the wood frogs that come every spring. So we're gonna go look closely in here and see if we could see any animals in here. See a lot of things moving in here? If you look closely, you should be able to see some tadpoles swimming around. And there's a dog trying to get something to drink. Let's go over here, see if we can see any tadpoles. This pond is typically surrounded by a bunch of skunkweed cabbage. They're the first plants that grow every spring. They actually make heat when they grow, so they melt the snow around them. And this pond too will dry up soon. You'll find lots of little tadpoles in here. Lots of fairy shrimp. They're kind of like a teeny little crawdad. It's kind of hard to see with the reflection. But these are the kind of ponds that we'll talk about today. And I'll show you what kind of animals you might find in a pond like this.
The school, there's that huge lake. Remember that huge lake when you first drive around that neighborhood? That's a huge lake that it doesn't usually have very much life in it. It's too polluted. When you have big lakes like that, they gather all the pollution and you don't have a lot of good pond life. You won't usually have beaver in there. You'll have geese and you'll have ducks, but when you have lots of geese and duck, they make ponds really polluted. So they poop in the pond and they make it really polluted. So we are going to talk about smaller ponds. And smaller ponds were like the ponds in my pictures. Those are called vernal ponds. Vernal ponds are small things of water that are usually caused by the rain. They're not made by a creek that goes into it and a creek that goes out. They're just made by the rain and the snow melting. And so they only last until about middle July and August, and then they dry up. So they're gone. So they're gone most of the year. That's why they're called vernal ponds. They disappear. But the good thing about that is if you have a pond that disappears, it doesn't stay around all year, it has no fish in it. And that's what's so important to amphibians like frogs and salamanders and those little guys. They have to have a pond that has no fish, because if there's fish in it, it will eat their eggs and then they will die. So they'll never even live because the animals will eat their eggs. So we need to find those little ponds that don't last for very long and they dry up, but by then the animals have grown up and they've gone about their way and they're safe from all the fish eating them. So when we talk about ponds, first of all, everyone thinks of fish, right? Fish are the most common animal in a pond. And even in these tiny, they're not in the vernal ponds, but in the creeks, we have little fish, right? I brought a couple of little fish here. Cricket's going to, let me put them here, Cricket. She has a fish tank here she's going to show you. Fish. That one right there happens to be a bluegill. Now, he would eat all the eggs of the frogs and the salamanders. He would eat them all. These are called bass that she's showing you now. They're a little hard to catch now. They're very tricky. Can you get a picture of those, Cricket? Mm-hmm. Those are dace. Those are the most common minnows in our ponds. Now, remember when we talk about fish, fish have gills. So fish cannot breathe the air, right? They can only breathe the oxygen that is contained inside of water. So they can't breathe the air like we breathe. They can only find the air inside the water. So we can't do that because we don't have gills. There's another little snail in here too. He loves the ponds too. Whenever you find snails like this, it's usually a pond that's not very clean, quite frankly. They like the really dirty ponds. But these fish that you see here, they usually like the really fast running creeks. They like a lot of oxygen in their water. And the more water, the faster the water goes in a creek, the more oxygen it has. So these are animals that have gills. And so they can, and they will always have gills, right? Fish are born like fish, and when they get big, they still look like fish. They don't change, right? A little fish is just little. It gets to be a bigger fish, but it doesn't change. So you know my favorite animals, right? What are my favorite animals? Do you remember? Frogs, right? They do change. They're called amphibians. Amphibians are my favorite animal in a pond. And I always go to ponds because that's where I know I'm going to find something alive. So I love to go to ponds. So when we have frogs, they start off looking very much like a fish, right? So let's compare them. Here's a baby frog. Did she go? You went in there, Cricket? There's a baby frog. And it looks very much like a fish. His body's tight. The shape of his body is very much like a fish. He also has gills just like a fish. So he cannot breathe air either. He's got to stay in the water like these fish. Can you get that one? Or let me get you another one. But when he grows up, he's going to have to get rid of those gills because he's going to become an animal that lives on the ground. So when he's in the water, he breathes with his gills. But when he's on the ground, he has to breathe with lungs like you and I do. So he can't breathe underwater anymore when he's big. So tadpoles and frogs are animals called amphibians. That means they have two lives. One life starts in the water, and then when they get big, their second life starts on the land. So it means two lives. That's as if you were sleeping one morning in your bed, and the next night you woke up and you had wings. You went from an animal who lives on the land to an animal that lives in the air. Wouldn't that be cool if that was possible? But we can't do that. We only have one life. When you're little, you're a small human. And then when you get big, you get to be a big human. But you don't grow wings. You don't grow anything else. You still stay with the same body parts, right? 2 arms, 2 legs, 1 head. So the tadpoles, they have a big job to do. They have to get rid of those gills that let them breathe like a fish, get rid of their gills, and they have to grow some lungs. They actually grow these lungs out of nothing. Isn't that cool? How do they know how to do that? So they get lungs, which are like those balloons in our chest that lets us breathe. So they become like us, breathing the air. So they get rid of their gills, they get some lungs, their little pucker mouth changes to a big frog smile. They have to get back legs. They have to grow front legs. Isn't that cool? And their eyes actually move up to the top of their head. So it's on the top of their head. So their eyes actually move on their body. Isn't that cool? So they have all kinds of changes they have to make to become a frog. The fish, remember, they say they never change from their gills. They always keep their gills all their lives. So when these guys do grow into a frog, and I think, Cricket, we do have some guys with back legs, don't we, in here? Mm-hmm. We got one little guy's getting his back legs. So he's starting. He still has his gills, but he's getting his back legs. Then he'll get his front legs. Then he will lose his gills and he will get his lungs. And finally, he'll lose his tail. So those guys, of course, grow into these big guys, right? This is a guy who went through the whole transformation. This is not a guy, this is a girl who went through the whole transformation, right? See how she's got now a long mouth, a long smiley mouth, and see how her eyes are on the top of her head? She's got her legs, she has no tail.
And if you look at her ear, is her ear the same size or is it bigger than her eye? It's kind of hard to tell. This should be, if I have the right one. Yep, I have the right one. Her ear should be the same size as her eye. That's how I know she's a girl. Their eyes and their ears are the same size. Now look at the boy. Here's a boy. Do you see his ear? Look how his ear is twice as big as his eye. That tells me he's a boy. And that's because it's so important for boys to be able to hear each other, because they're calling each other. They're telling each other that this is my pond. You stay away from my pond. And they're calling the girls. The girls aren't really listening. Remember, their ears aren't very big, so they don't really care. But it's important for the boys to talk to each other so they have big ears. Isn't that cool? I think that's awesome. Can frogs smell? Can they smell other animals? Frogs can. It's important for them to smell. And so they can smell predators. They can smell if the water's getting bad. If it's got pollution in it, they can smell that. And they can move away from that pond if it smells bad to them. So they can smell and they hear really well, especially the boys. And they see really well too. They can see you from 15 feet away and see you coming and jump away. So these frogs are what those tadpoles turned into. Now see how the frog is floating? He doesn't have gills anymore. So he cannot breathe underwater. He can go underwater, breath if he wants, but he can't breathe underwater anymore. So he likes to stay on the top of the water where it's easy for him to breathe and where those eyes on top of his head can see predators coming. So he'll usually float around. If we scare him, look, see if we scare him, he'll swim to the bottom. But normally he likes to be up the top where he can see and he can breathe. He can go down the bottom to hide, but then he can't see what's happening. So he usually floats at the top. So actually, do I need to get him out? Oh, no. Maybe I'll leave him sit there for a minute. All right. There's another animal that looks like a frog that goes through the same changes, but he usually spends all his time on the land and not, are you watching cricket? On the land and not inside the water. He can float, he can swim to the bottom, but what's this guy? Actually, I don't know if this is a boy or girl. I think this is a girl, actually. Now, you cannot do the trick with her and look at her ear. It doesn't work with toads. This is an American toad. She has all these bumps on her. All these bumps contain some poison. Now, it's not going to kill us. It's not that bad kind of poison that would kill us if we ate it. But if a raccoon ate it, or maybe a small dog, it could make them very sick. So when an animal bites her and tries to bite her, little poison comes out of these bumps. So she does not have to jump very fast or very far. If I put her here, see how she's not worried about me? She's just not trying to walk away very fast. She's not worried about me at all because she knows she has poison all over her body. So she's not very afraid of me. She says, go ahead, try to bite me, try to eat me, and you'll be sorry because I have poison. So she doesn't jump very fast and she doesn't jump very far, and she's not worried about me. Remember the frog? The frog is very slimy, very hard to hold, and jumps very fast. And he has to because he doesn't have poison. So he's got to be slimy, he's got to be fast to stay away from me. And that's how I caught him, right? Because he wasn't fast enough this time. Or maybe Cricket caught him, I'm not sure. He's slimy to get away from his predators. She doesn't have to be slimy. She knows she has poison, so she's not worried. Now, guys, these are totally safe to pick up. As long as you don't lick your hand or eat the toad or the frog, you're safe. Look how he's holding on. See how she holds on with her hands? I'm not even holding her. She's holding me. Not awesome. She's not dangerous as long as you don't lick your hands. And that's the same for everything. Anytime you touch anything, really, and before you eat, you don't put your hands in your mouth, right? But especially with animals. She has poison on here, so I'd never put my hand to my mouth now. And even if I did, it probably wouldn't hurt me. It's just a good idea not to, especially with this coronavirus we have going on, right? We wash our hands for everything. So I'll put her away. Now, am I in danger of her biting me? Not really. They're not aggressive. But you know what? Even if she did, toads don't have teeth. So she wouldn't even hurt me if she did try to bite me. So when she wants to eat something, she grabs it with her hands and she shoves it in her mouth and she eats it. Now, frogs, when they eat something, they have a trick to swallow their food. They have to close their eyes to swallow their food. And when they close those eyes, it shoves the food down their throat. Isn't that cool? They can't just swallow. They have to close their eyes. And when their eyes close, their eyes kind of go in their head and push the food down their throat. Isn't that cool? The other cool thing about frogs is they can't drink. So if I gave them a glass of water, they couldn't drink it. They don't know how. They cannot drink. It's impossible for them to drink. So all of their water comes through their skin. Just goes right through their skin. Same thing with our air. They can't breathe air. I mean, they can breathe air a little bit, but most of the air goes right through their body. And that's why it's so important for us to keep their environment clean. Because if I gave you a drink of dirty, yucky, gross water, would you drink it? Nope, you wouldn't drink it, right? You'd throw it away. But the frog doesn't have a choice because it goes right through his body. He can't throw it away. So he has to drink whatever we give him. Or he has to take it in his body because he doesn't have a choice. It goes right through his skin. That's why they have that slimy skin, to allow water and air to go right through their skin. So it's good because it makes it easy for them, but it's bad because they can't choose what they eat and drink, or they can choose what they eat, but not drink because it goes right through their body. All right, so those are amphibians. Now you know my other favorite amphibians, right? Amphibians, I talk about amphibians with a pond because you will always find them by a pond because they need a pond to lay their eggs. Mammals like us or birds don't need a pond to lay their eggs. Or turtles, reptiles don't need a pond to lay their eggs. They like to drink the water at a pond. They like to go to the pond to find animals to eat, but they don't need a pond to live. Amphibians need a pond to live because that's where they have to lay their eggs. Their eggs do not have a hard shell like birds, like birds. Or insects, they don't have a hard shell. They don't have any shell. They have to put their eggs in the water. So let me show you some cool eggs. I think I will just hold these and let Cricket show you. See these cool eggs?
Oh,
That's awesome. Don't jelly. Isn't that cool? Do you see those little black things inside? Those are like the yellow inside of a chicken egg. Those black parts are the yellow, and the white part is like the white on a chicken egg. Every one of those little black things is going to turn into an animal. Can you see the one on top, Crickets, how it's getting long? See how it's getting long? Wow. It used to be a little dot. Now it's long. When it's long like that, that tells me it's about to hatch. It's getting long. It's not going to be a tadpole, but these look a little bit like frog eggs. But these aren't frog eggs, but they look a lot like them. These are the eggs of my other favorite animals, right? Here they are. These are the eggs of the salamanders that I love so much. So hard to find these animals. You only find them once a year, only the time when they're laying their eggs, because the rest of the year they spend their time underground. And they only come up like in the middle of the night to eat, but it's hard to find them. If you find them, you're very, very lucky. But when they're breeding and laying their eggs, they're easy to find if you know where to look. So here's a couple of the salamanders who laid those eggs that we just looked at. These animals are always near a pond because they have to lay their eggs. They can swim very well. Should we show them one swimming, Cricket? Let's put one in there and see if they swim. They swim kind of like a snake. See how he puts his arms and legs back and he wiggles his tail? He swims like a snake. So they're very, very, very good swimmers. They just don't like to swim very much. They like to live under the ground, but they need the pond to lay their eggs. And they lay their eggs in like March. As you can see, these eggs are still fresh. They're going to hatch. So this little girl laid these eggs. Those are her eggs. So they will hatch and they will look a little bit like a tadpole when they're very, very small. But when they grow a little bit more, let me show you what they look like. So they don't grow into tadpoles. They grow into what we call larvae. And those, I don't think I'll put these in the water, Cricket. I think I'll just take this out. Can you see them? Is the water clear enough? Mm-hmm. These guys are the babies. Now these are big. So these hatched out of their eggs probably last year, actually. These are probably second-year larvae. And you see how they have feathers on their neck? See the feathers? Those are their gills. Just like I told you that fish have gills and tadpoles have gills, these feathery things on their neck is how they get oxygen out of the water. Those are what they breathe with. And when they are adults, they will come out of the water. And see the adult? See how the adult doesn't have any more feathers on him, on his neck? They will lose those feathers around their neck and then they will forever live on the ground, on the land. So these guys, the little ones in the water, have to stay in the water. While they have those feathers on their neck, they cannot breathe air. So they have to stay in the water to get their oxygen. They don't know how to breathe the air that we breathe. They have to stay in there. So it's always the best time of year. It's about March when you go out and you find the eggs and you find the adults in the water. And then the big guys, they will get this big by about October. And then they will hibernate. But when it's reptiles and amphibians, we call it brumation, not hibernation, but it's essentially the same thing. They will hibernate over the winter, way, way, way down deep in the mud, way down deep. And then they will come in the bottom of a pond, and then they will come out the next year, and they will lose those gills, and then they will run around like the adult ones. All right, there's another really cool animal, another kind of salamander, but it's not a salamander. This is a newt. These are in the ponds. These are in the ponds at the same time as the salamanders. And do you know why they do that? Animals in a pond always come out. They know when to come out. And these guys know when to come out when the frogs lay their eggs. These are called eastern newts. These are actually pretty poisonous. They're more poisonous than the toads. If you ate these, you'd get very sick. But again, they're safe to handle as long as you don't lick your hands. These guys come out when the frogs lay their eggs because these guys eat the frog eggs. So everything in nature takes its time and knows when to come out. So these guys wait till the frogs come out. They wait till the wood frogs come out, and then the wood frogs lay their eggs, and then these guys have something to eat. And it's always a big treat to find these guys too, because they're very, very hard to find. But again, if you know when to go to a pond, then you know what you can find. Same thing with tadpoles. When I go to a pond, all tadpoles look very similar. They look very much alike to each other. And it's very, very hard to tell when looking at a tadpole, which tadpole it's going to be. Here's a bunch of little ones. And remember, actually, I'll put a couple in here. Cricket, can you see the size difference between the big tadpoles and the little tadpoles? There's two up front. You see them? See the little one and the big one? Usually you can't tell what a tadpole, what kind of frog it's going to grow into, unless you know what time of year it is. Now, these tiny tadpoles, for them to be that tiny right now, tells me already that those are wood frog tadpoles, just because of the size they are. If they were super, super big right now, like the other ones, I know those big ones were last year's tadpoles, which tells me those are green tadpoles, green frog tadpoles, or bullfrog tadpoles, because I know a tadpole could not be this big this early in the spring. So if they're that big, that means they have to be from last year, which means they have to be green frogs or bullfrogs. The baby tadpoles now, the only tadpoles that have hatched yet are either wood frogs or spring peepers. So I can use my logic to tell me they must be wood frogs because those are the only tadpoles that have hatched yet, and they're too big to be spring peeper eggs. So when you go to a pond, if you know what time it is and who's out, then you can figure out who else should be there, because they all have a specific time of coming out, because they all feed off each other and they all live together, and then you can tell who's supposed to be out when they're supposed to be out. Now this is another cool animal that Cricket actually came home one day with one of these on her legs. Do you know what this is? This is also an animal that tells me that the water is not very clean. This animal you'll find in a dirty pond like that big lake. You know those big lakes that's telling you all the geese are pooping in and stuff? This is a leech. Aren't they so cool? These leeches have 32 brains. Isn't that cool? So they must be so much smarter than we are, right? Because they have 32 brains and we only have one brain. They have one mouth on this end and one mouth on this end. One mouth sticks to something and one mouth sucks the blood out of something. Now, they're not really smarter than we are because they have 32 brains. Here's the difference. And by the way, if this one bit you and tried to drink some blood from you, you would not even know it. You would not even feel it because they have special medicine in their mouth that is a painkiller. So you won't even feel them bite you. It's a special trick they use. They have another kind of medicine in their mouth that makes your blood flow more quickly. And normally if you get a cut on your finger, it stops bleeding. When he uses this medicine, it keeps bleeding. And that means he can drink more and more blood faster. And then when he gets full, he just drops right off. And you know what? Actually, guys, these guys aren't likely to give you a disease. They really aren't. They're pretty clean. The only time they give you a disease is if you pull them off, and then it makes them sometimes throw up, basically, and that puts a disease in you. But if they, I know it's kind of gross, but if they just fall off you, they don't usually transfer any kind of disease to you. If you just let them fall off, it's usually the safest thing. Anyhow, these guys have 32 brains, but that doesn't make them smarter than us. They have 32 brains because our one brain handles everything our body needs to do. Our one brain tells my eyes what to do, my ears, it tells my heart to breathe or beat, it tells my lungs to breathe, it tells everything my body needs to do. These guys, they need a brain for everything their body does. So they need one brain to tell them their eyes to work. They need one brain to feel things. They need one brain to tell their body to eat. So every one of their brains does a different thing. That's why they need 32 of them. But our brain does all the things, right? So those are cool animals. If you ever do get a leech when you go in a pond, first of all, you're not going to get one if it's a very clean pond. They don't live in the very clean ponds. Not usually. You can, I guess, but they're not very common. And they're usually not going to hurt you. It freaks you out, but they're not going to hurt you. In fact, in the old England, which is another country, they used to call old doctors leeches. That used to be the word for doctor, is a leech, because they use leeches in their medicine. Because leeches make your blood. First of all, if a doctor's operating on you and he has to cut your arm open and then fix your bone, if there's too much blood, the doctor can't see what he's doing. So that he put a leech on here to suck up the blood so the doctor could see what he was doing. The other thing they do it, sometimes doctors are able to move a piece of skin from here to here. Let's say you're missing a big piece of skin and the doctor needed to attach a new piece of skin. He would put a leech here because remember the leech has the medicine in his mouth to make the blood flow quicker. So he'd put the leech here. It would make the blood flow quicker over to your new piece of skin and it would make you heal faster. So doctors use leeches a lot to help them do their medicine. So leeches are not such a bad animal. And in fact, sometimes I order these from the doctor and then I know they're leeches and they're not pond leeches. All right, let's see who else I have here. Oh, so we saw, okay, the first frogs that come out in the spring, I showed you guys these before. The tiny little spring peepers, tiny, tiny. They're only as big as the tiny end of your pinky finger. And they're the loudest frogs, right? And they go, beep, 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 right? And we hear them everywhere and they're so hard to see because they're so tiny. Let me show you the biggest frog that we have.
I'm looking.
Let me show you the biggest frog that we have in our ponds. You ready, Cricket? Look at this one. This is our biggest frog. Isn't he beautiful? Actually, am I right? Is it a boy or a girl?
Nice. Girl.
At his ear and his eye.
Girl. The
You
girl.
got it. Yes, this is a girl. This is a lady. And usually the girls are much bigger than the boys. So I could even tell by her size, she's probably a girl. So this is our big old bullfrog. She lives in our ponds too, and she eats everything. She eats mice and birds and other frogs. She would eat baby turtles. She eats everything. Yeah, they are lovely. So our frogs go from the big one. Stop. Our frogs go from the tiniest little spring peepers to the big giant bullfrog. Isn't that awesome? I love them. Let me wash my hands because she's very slimy, and then I will slip next to him I hold. Then we have our lovely animals now. If you go out to your ponds right now, so every time at the very beginning of the spring, I go out and I hear the spring peepers. Then I hear the wood frogs. The next frog I hear, and so even if I don't see them, I know they're there, are these lovely guys. These guys are the ones you're calling right now. Whoops. All right, it's because they're slimy, remember? They're hard to hold on. All right. Look at that. Here we go. All right. This is a gray tree frog. These are the tree frogs. They will be near the pond, right? And they will be hanging on the bushes near the pond. They like to lay their eggs in the pond, but they don't live in the pond so much. They live in the trees next to it. See, she's a tree frog and she's climbing up me. These are the ones that you are hearing now. And see the bright yellow on her legs? Can you see that, Cricket? Bright yellow? Yeah. That bright yellow is kind of a warning to animals. It's supposed to surprise animals when she jumps. That bright flash of color is supposed to surprise animals and confuse them when she jumps. So that's the only defense she has. The only defense she has is camouflage. She can change all different colors of grays and browns and blacks, so she can camouflage. Do you see she looks like the bark of a tree? So her trick is to look exactly like a tree bark. So she'll change her color of her skin to whatever tree she's on. She can't change to blue and pink and all those colors, but she can change to any kind of bark on her tree. And that's her only defense she has, is to camouflage. She has no other defense. And then when she jumps, she has that bright yellow color that she hopes will surprise an animal so she can get away from them. But these are lovely animals. If you go out right now, you're going to hear all of these calling. And these will call all summer. They're breeding right now. They're making eggs right now in the pond. But you will hear them calling all summer, and especially when it rains. I love these guys. When I came from Montana, we never had tree frogs out there. So these are really special to me, because I never got to have these when I was little. Aren't they cool? But they go through the tadpole stage like any other frog. And she's a girl. I can tell by her size that she's a girl. She's just a little big to me, a little plump to me to be a male. So she looks like a girl to me. I think I have two girls. I think they're both girls. There's my two girls. See that a little bit difference in color? But they can change much different colors. They'll go from a green to almost a black, so they can camouflage into the tree bark. All right, we'll put those two girls away. So the next animals, after these guys get done singing in the ponds, and I know that they're breeding, the next ones to bring are going to breed to make their eggs are going to be the green frogs. Those ones I first showed you. They'll be the next ones we hear in the ponds. You'll hear them probably late June into July. They'll start singing, and they sing during the day. This is one of the few frogs that sing during the day, not the nighttime. So daytime ponds, you'll hear these lovely ones. And then you'll hear our big old bullfrog. That's the last one to breed. So the bullfrog will breed last. Its tadpole, it'll lay eggs. Its tadpoles will be born, and then they will brumate over the winter. Bullfrog tadpoles will not change into frogs the first year, the first summer. They take 2 years to change. That's how I knew these big guys had to be bullfrogs or green frogs. Because green frogs can take 2 years, not always. Usually they do it in the summer, but they can. The bullfrog always needs 2 years. So I'm pretty sure these guys are bullfrogs. They may be green, but probably bullfrogs. All right, so those are our amphibians, right? Those are the guys that have 2 lives. They change, they start off as a water animal, and then they grow into a land animal, essentially. Then we have our reptiles, right? Reptiles have scales, which means if I put water on my skin, do you see how it does not go into my skin? It stays on top of my skin. It does not go through my skin. If I was an amphibian with slimy skin, it would go right through my skin. But our skin doesn't let water go in. Reptiles, water does not go into their skin either. They have scales, right? So it can't go in. So they need water to breathe, or to drink, I mean, but they don't need water to live in, like the amphibians. They don't lay their eggs in the pond. But you will find them, I show them in a pond, because that's where they go to get their food. So while they don't need the water to live, they need to go there to find animals to eat. So you guys know the turtles, right? Everybody thinks these must be amphibians because you always find them in the water. They stay in the water. First of all, that's where their food is. Especially adult turtles are mostly vegetarians. They mostly eat plants. Baby turtles eat mostly meat. Big turtles eat mostly plants. So they live in the water because that's where their food is. But they don't need the water to live. It's just where they find their food. What else was I going to say? Oh, and it's also for their safety. Because, you know, turtles will dive down so nobody can find them. They're not very fast swimmers, but they go deep down and they can hold their breath for a long time. So it's safer for them to live in the water. Because if you find them on land, right, they're slow. They're really easy to catch. So they live in the pond for their safety, not because they need the water, because it's safe. So this is a little guy. I just caught this guy this spring, which tells me he was born last fall. So this is not eggs from this year. This guy, if he's this big, you want to get close to him, Cricket? This guy, if he's this big, tells me he was born last fall and he sucked through the winter. He brumated through the winter under the ground somewhere. And this is an Eastern painted. He doesn't have very bright colors, but he has beautiful orange or red color around him. This guy is so dark, sometimes it's very hard to tell his colors. And usually the bottom, the plastron of a shell is either dark like this or like a cream color, but it doesn't have any color on it. This guy is also a painted turtle. He doesn't have as much colors either, but usually he's from the West. He's from Montana and Colorado. He usually has a lot more color on him. This guy is about 2 years old. These guys are perfectly safe to hold. Always hold a turtle from the back just in case they bite. I've never been bitten by one of these guys. They're perfectly safe to hold. And these are the most common turtle we find in our ponds. And they're safe. The guy who's not safe, and these are reptiles, remember? When they're born, they look like a turtle. And when they're big, they look like a big turtle. They don't go through a change like the amphibians do. They look exactly the same as when they're little as when they're big, or when they're old, except they're just bigger. But they don't change the shape of the body or the way they live. This guy is the only dangerous turtle we have in our ponds. See how long his tail is? See how long his neck is? And this is just a baby. Isn't he adorable? So he's got a super long neck. He has a super long tail. And the back of his shell is kind of jagged. Do you see it's all jaggedy? At the top of the shell is a little jaggedy. This is a snapper. This guy can bite your finger off. Now this little baby probably can't. But whenever you see a turtle from a distance, you could tell right away with that long neck and that long tail that he's a snapper. So you know you don't want to pick him up. See the little painted turtle? You can't even see his tail. It's so small. He has a little tail. He's just not putting it out right now. But it's that small. See the difference? So you could tell this one from a long way away and know that he's not a safe turtle to pick up. You probably won't see this one very often. This one does not come out on a log to sun himself very often. Hardly at all, really. If he comes out to get sun, he'll probably be floating in the middle of the pond and just kind of doing a belly float in the middle of the pond, getting some sun. He doesn't come out on the shore very often at all. If he does, then it's either a female who's looking for a new place to lay her eggs, or it's a turtle that's sick. So either way, you don't want to bug them. If you see a snapper on the ground, they're in a bad mood for one reason or another. Either they're sick or it's a female looking for a new pond to lay their eggs. And she doesn't feel comfortable out on the land, so they will be a little bit aggressive. They might try to snap at you because they're not comfortable on the ground. They know they're not safe out there. So they'll be kind of mean. They might be a little aggressive to you. So it's never good to touch a snapper. Especially if they get a hold of you, they can really hurt you. The other turtles probably won't bite you. She will try to bite you because she doesn't know any better. She's out of her element. She's scared. She's uncomfortable because she's on the ground. When you're walking in a pond, people think she might bite you. She might think your toe is a worm, but I've never had it happen. They will try to hide way, way down deep in the pond, and they're not going to try to bite you. They really aren't going to unless it's a mistake on their part. These guys are almost prehistoric. These guys were around before the dinosaurs. Isn't that cool? And it's worked for them all these years. They've survived, and their body shape and size has not changed in all these years. So they lived before the dinosaurs, and they lived after the dinosaurs. So that's how successful these guys are. And my turtles all live together. So even though she's a snapper and she could hurt people, she lives with her friends in there, and she never tries to eat them. She could bite off their legs or their tails. She would never try to. She doesn't want to hurt them, but she does like her worms. So I will feed her worms. Now, here's a question. Can turtles smell? Do they have a sense of smell? Can they smell different flavors, or not flavors, but you know what I mean? Can they smell different scents? They can. They can smell things because very often they're looking for dead meat, and dead meat smells good to turtles. And so they can smell something, but they don't smell with their nose. They use their nose to breathe like we do, but underneath their chin, they have two little organs, and that's where they smell. Under their chin are two little points,
And that's how they smell things. Isn't that cool? So animals can use their nose to breathe. We use our nose to breathe and to smell. But some animals just use their nose to breathe, and they have other ways to smell, like a snake, right? You guys know my snakes, right? Here is a snake that we're going to find very close to the water. Not because he likes the water, but because he likes what lives in the water. And right now, the toads and the frogs are laying their eggs, right? This is called a hognose snake. This snake loves toads, and he loves little baby toads. And right now, the toads are laying their eggs. And so those eggs are going to hatch, and then they're going to be nice little baby toads, and this guy will go crazy. Do you see his little bump, not bump, what do you call it, Cricket, on his nose? His little upturned nose, little hook on his nose. See him? Isn't that cool? Yeah. So he will go looking for little toads as they come out of as they turn into tadpoles and then grow up and go onto the land. This guy is going to be near the water looking for toads to come out that he can eat. Now, technically, this guy is considered venomous. This guy is what you guys might say is poison, but we don't say poison when an animal bites you, like he would bite. If an animal has poison in him, we call it venom. So he bites me, that means he's venomous. If I lick him and I get sick, that means they're poisonous. This guy is technically venomous, but even if he bit me, he doesn't have enough poison in him or venom in him to hurt me. This guy's name is Holla because he lives at a synagogue, and so the kids named him Holla for the bread they eat. Isn't he cool? Now he's got that little upturn to his nose. He uses that to dig holes with. This is one of the very, 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 very few snakes that can dig their own hole. Snakes can't dig. They don't have any arms. This guy's got that little nose, though, that helps him dig a little bit. But usually when snakes find a hole, it's usually a hole that was made by mice or other little rodents, and the snake goes in there and he eats up the mice and he takes over the hole. This guy can build his own hole a little bit, but you know what? It'd still be easier to eat a toad or a mouse and take their home instead. So this is a kind of reptile that you're going to find near a pond, not because he needs the water to live, but because he needs the animals who live in the water to eat. And see his little tongue coming out? Remember I told you some animals use their nose to smell, and some animals use their nose to breathe. This guy also uses his nose. He has a nose. He uses it to breathe, but not to smell. That little tongue coming out there, he's looking at the camera and wondering if Cricket has a little toad for him to eat. So he's sticking his tongue out to see if he can smell a toad to eat. He takes the molecules, air molecules, you know, all the air is made out of different kind of molecules. Everything's made out of molecules. He's taking the molecules of the air, he's bringing them into his mouth, and his nose the organ that tells him what it smells like is on the top of the roof of his mouth. So his tongue grabs the air molecules, puts them in his mouth, and then he can see he can taste them. He can see what they smell like to see if there's a toad around. That's another reason I know he's not going to bite me. He knows I don't smell like a toad. He doesn't use his eyes to tell that. He uses his tongue to see what I smell like. And he knows I'm not a toad. He also has fangs that point backwards. They don't point out like this, they point backwards. And that's because when toads want to protect themselves, they blow their whole body up with air so that they look really big and scary. And with those fangs he has, he just goes and he pops those airbags. So the toad deflates, loses all the air, and then he can eat them. It sounds mean, but you know what? Everyone's got to eat, right? I love these snakes. These are wonderful, wonderful, wonderful snakes. If you find one of these, a hognose, again, you're super, super lucky. These are kind of hard to find. And so you're super, super lucky if you find one of these. These are really special ones. I had one when I was little, and it got loose in the house, and I never found it again. But I was really excited at the time. My mom wasn't so excited because she thought it was a rattlesnake. She thought it looked a lot like a rattlesnake. And their pattern kind of does. But when you see that little upturned nose, you know he's okay. You know he's a safe snake. All right, let me see what else. Do you guys have any questions? Maybe we can unmute the kids and see if anyone has any questions.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
questions, Zishan?
I don't. You can you ask a question? Can we have a last animal?
So what animal?
Yeah.
Say it again, Z.
Okay. Going to turn on.
Zishan, we did not hear you. Can you sit up and say it again?
We can put a different water animal like a water snake.
Like
Water
a water
snake.
snake?
It have legs and it have two legs and can swim in water by putting the legs out inside.
You'll find lots of water snakes by the water because their main food is fish, right? Fish and frogs. Water snakes are kind of a mean snake. Not because they're mean, not because they want to hurt you. They're just a grumpy snake. I find water snakes to be very, very grumpy. So they will try to strike at you to scare you. And they can be pretty bitey snakes. They're just a grumpy snake.
How about a baby one? Is that
Baby ones are safer. Baby ones don't know what to be scared of yet. So they're a little bit of a safer snake to pick up. The baby ones, they usually are, because they haven't learned to be afraid yet.
Hey, Cameron, you were raising your hand for a while. Do you have a question for Miss Julie?
yes?
Okay, what's it? What is it?
Pond water can change very easily when ducks and geese poop in there. It gets dirty very fast.
Yep. Yep, it can trash the water pretty badly. That pollution can, yeah. Poor ducks and geese. I mean, where do you want them to go potty, right? Problem.
Hey, Jack, can you come closer to the computer? We can't hear you.
Some snakes can make some music out of them, so when they grow up.
So
Make some music out of them?
Yeah, music.
That sounds cool. Do snakes make sounds? Can any snake make a sound?
Yes. Yeah.
You can do
Everybody says that they make a sound, but you really can't hear it very well. Cricket says she can hear it. I can't hear it. But you know what they do make a sound with is with their tail. They will shake their tail. You know, a rattlesnake has an actual rattle. But these other snakes have learned the trick of shaking their tail too and making the leaves shake. And then everybody thinks they're a rattlesnake.
right? When they grow up, they grow rattles. But when they're
Only one snake grows rattles.
they don't have rattles.
Guys, we only have 2 snakes that are venomous in Maryland. So you don't have to worry very much about running into a venomous snake. We only have the copperhead and the timber rattlesnake are the only venomous snakes. All these other snakes are not going to be venomous.
Andrew wants to comment over. Andrew.
Eli, do you have a question, hon?
Yeah. So whenever I was on a walk,
When you were on a walk, you saw a copperhead?
Well, you are being a snake.
Yeah, I saw a snake on the walk.
Cool. Was it a long black one?
Yeah.
Those are big rat snakes. Those are awesome. Their biggest defense is making a really big stink. If you pick them up or bother them, they'll make a musk, which means a really bad stink. And that's how they defend themselves. But they're not very dangerous.
Interesting.
Yeah, Zishan?
Smell. But they are poisonous.
Rat snakes are not poisonous, just the copperheads are. And the timber rattlesnake.
the
They're
big
too high up for us.
What's the wax water snake can swim?
Water snakes are super, super good swimmers, right? Very fast.
It's the meeting almost done.
Like a bunch.
Yeah. Antonia, do you have your hand raised?
I want to get some more.
You have a question?
Yeah.
What is it?
I like rattlesnakes because they sound like a real rabbit.
I know, they're cool, right?
You like rattlesnakes? Yeah, that's a great comment.
They do sound like
Does anybody else have a question for Miss Julie? Anybody else? Well, thank you so much, Miss Julie. That was awesome.
All right, that was great, Julie. Thank you.
Thank you.
What do you guys say to Miss Julie?
Thank you, Miss. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Jack.
Thanks, Julie.
Goodbye. Goodbye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.